Risk-taking. It's not something most humans are particularly good at outside of a weekend in Vegas. It is a critical piece, however, of the creative and competitive sides of the car world. In 1992, hot off the heels of the GC8 Impreza, and filled with steadfast confidence, Subaru leapt into the unknown. Yeah, Subaru, the last brand any of us would expect to dive off of the metaphorical deep end of design. Clearly. But they did, once. This is the Subaru SVX. Oh, does it not work every time? No. This is the problem, guys. Technology. Do you just try until it hits it? Oh, okay, yeah. Magic touch. Oh, there we go. Sweet. Dual procedure. All right, we start the Subaru SVX review off by a nice, what would have been a very kind gesture from Subaru, by putting my seatbelt on for me, making up for all of the blown head gaskets and blown turbos. I'm kidding, please, Subaru fanboys, don't attack me in the comments. This is a Subaru SVX. This is one of the strangest Japanese vehicles ever made. Designed by the same designer who put together the DeLorean and the BMW 1M. Sorry, not the 1M, the M1. So confusing. The SVX, as you guys can see, is a kind of standout model in the 1990s Subaru world. So I'm pretty stoked to go for a drive today. Look at this. This, you guys, is the only time you will ever see Alcantara factory in a Subaru. This is gnarly. This is just something you would never expect. I mean, it has that kind of German, or even almost borderline Italian kind of luxury feel, just in the sense that the entire interior is Alcantara. That's standard, that's commonplace nowadays in supercars, but you guys, we're talking about a car that was only roughly at the time $10,000 more than an Impreza. Very smooth. There's just a little bit more play in the steering than would be in a WRX, but the ride's honestly sublime. You know, I've never driven a Porsche 928, but I think this not Subaru's version of the Porsche 928? Is this not that? Okay, 3.3 liter, flat six up front versus the 4 cylinders in the Impreza. So already there, we've got 230 horsepower. It's got linear torque, way bigger displacement than an EJ20 or EJ25, and it's heavy. It's a heavy kind of touring vehicle. And, you know, of course, the 928 was built originally to potentially replace the 911. The SVX was never built to replace the Impreza. That was never their intention. But it's interesting because it does mark, like, where a potential divergence could have taken place, but actually here, I was gonna say failed miserably. I don't think it failed miserably, because now this is a cult classic. And Stefan, the owner, was actually telling me that he went to an event down in the States where all of the Subaru SVX owners from North America gathered, I believe in Kentucky. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, but there's 4,000 RPM. And they got to drive their SVXs on track and really experience them and push their limits, which, I mean, these cars were only offered in automatic. Wow, it's got a lot of grip. Wow, this thing handles way better than I thought it was going to. The steering's actually buttery smooth. There's definitely a lot less road feel coming in, like the small stuff, the small little bumps, than what would be felt in an STI. But it's heavy. Yeah, definitely a little bit more boosted than an STI. A lot less of the front tires are making its way to my hands here. It does actually have a very smart, especially for the time, active center differential that will variably send power front to rear. I believe actually on these ones, the earlier ones, it can send up to 50% of the torque to the rear. So it is active in that way. It's not like a traditional WRX setup. Okay, so no Tiptronic in the SVX, but if you really just give a good kick down on the gas pedal, what it'll do is it'll go into power mode, and then it'll make the shifts a little bit quicker and snappier, and then it'll change the shift points, of course, so it shifts closer to the 6,500 RPM red line, or 7,000 RPM red line. There we go, power. A green light on the dash comes up, tells you you've got the power. It's not slow. You know, the style of the vehicle alone and the way it looks like more of a sports car, but it is definitely a touring vehicle here. Lots of body roll. A little bit lazy. The transmission has seen better days. The transmission feels like it needs a little bit of an espresso shot, I feel like. I think it looks kind of quirky, especially from the rear quarter panel. I actually kind of dig the way it looks. See a little bit of a 3000 GT in the rear tail lights. And of course, these windows are very reminiscent of something like the Countach 80s era. So it does have a few design cues from the 80s era, absolutely. Yeah, when you're not in power mode, there is no power. But when you are, there's 230 horsepower. It's not slow. Very quiet. Sound deadening's good. These engines, apparently people push these to 1,000 horsepower and above, which is ridiculous. That is so insane. People turbocharge these. It is popular to manual swap these because times have changed and the manual gearboxes can actually handle the torque that this engine puts out. This is unlike any Subaru I've ever driven. It's also strange, there is no Subaru badge anywhere. There are no Subaru badges anywhere on the interior here. That is so incredibly strange. In terms of really separating it from the standard Subaru lineup, they made you aware, very aware, even on the materials and everything, that this is not your standard Subaru. And of course, this is an awesome touch. I don't know if you guys can see on the GoPro there, probably not. I'll put a shot in for you. But the center console here, when you hit this button, it basically unveils your cassette player, your CD player, and everything like that. So that's an OEM unit, but then you can hide it. So it's, you know, it kept a little bit of its timeless appeal. Same can be said about modern Rolls Royces that do kind of a similar thing with the infotainment, because they know technology like that tends to date cars very quickly. What a strange car. I don't particularly love the way it looks, but it is cool. It's just fascinating that the Japanese era in the 90s was home to all the greats. It was home to all the cars that you expected to perform really well and to sell really well. But it was also home to, because of the fact that the economy was kind of booming at the time in Japan, it was also home to a few experiments. And this is one of those experiments that did not really go well at the time, but has aged brilliantly, if only for the sheer fact that it's so unique and we can look back at this. It's a bit of a museum piece. This, of course, Subaru SVX came out in 1992. I believe that's the exact same year when the GC8 came out. the Impreza was introduced. So, but of course, the GC8 is the two-door. Of course, the 22B, that's the most iconic Subaru Impreza ever made, and that's a two-door coupe. You know, of course, it's the same as the four-door, but it's the two-door. So it makes sense that Subaru would come out with a two-door car. What doesn't make sense, what didn't make sense at the time, was that it was such a departure. They were taking such a chance. It was a roll of the dice, an absolute roll of the dice for Subaru, and I just can't imagine what they were thinking. And according to this cutout, the SVX was performance for those who love to drive. That's if, of course, your love of driving stems from a 15.7 second quarter-mile run and a left leg that's begun to atrophy by the time your trap speed is clocked. Jokes aside, its mission was actually never ultimate driver involvement. This is a luxury coupe through and through, ditching the idea of double wishbone suspension because the ultimate goal was less friction for a smoother ride. Even cutting fuel to half the cylinders during the 1-2 shift and a variable power steering rack drove that feeling home. In ways, it's disappointing the SVX didn't sell more, not because it's a bucket list car necessarily, but because we all know failures are what ultimately breeds success. The next risk could have truly been that new halo car Subaru was searching for, but we'll never know. Anyways, you guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. Subaru SVX. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit me up on Instagram if you haven't already. Subscribe if you want to see what I'm driving in the near future, and we'll see you guys very soon. Also, this has probably got to be one of the best bargains for like a quirky era car like this, 90s era car. You can pick these up. I mean, I'm not gonna say how much Stefan got this for, but it was under $5,000, which is crazy. These seatbelts are, yeah. Anyways, we'll see you soon.